Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, ISKCON Govardhana ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Guru Pamanandi. All glories to Samravadis, all glories to Samravadis, all glories to Samravadis, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guru. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 3, Pure Devotional Service, text number 20. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bile Bataru Krama Vikramanye Nashin Vatakana Pute Narasha Jiva Satida Durakeva Sutta Nacho Pyagayat Yirugaya Kataha Vile Bataru Kama Vikramaye Nashrin Vatakana Pute Narasha Jiva Satida Durakeva Sutta Nachopya Gayat Yuruguru Gayat Gataha Bile Butaro Krama Vikramaye Nashinvatakana Putana Rasya Jiva Sati Durakeva Sutta Nachopya Gayat Yuruguru Gataha Bile Bataru Krama Vikramanye Nashindrutakana Pute Narasya Chitantara Kareva Sutta Nachapikaya Jiguru Tataha Bile Bataru Krama Vikramaye Nashindrutakana Pute Narasya Jiva Sati Dadurikeva Sutta Nachopya Gacha Rugaya Gata Bile snake holes, Bata lake, Urukrama, the Lord who acts marvelously, Vikraman, prowess, yeah, all these, na, never, Shinvataha, heard, Karnapute, the ear holes, Narasya, of the man, Jiva, tongue, Asati, useless, Dadurika, of the frogs, Eva, exactly like that, Sutta, O Sutta Goswami, Na, never, Cha, also, Upagayati, chants loudly, Urugaya, worth singing, Gataha, songs. Translation, Prabhu Grace HG Bhagavatam Swami Shlapabhada Ki Jai. Translation, one who has not listened to the messages about the prowess and marvelous acts of the personality of Godhead and has not sung or chanted loudly the worthy songs about the Lord is to be considered to possess ear holes like the holes of a snake and a tongue like the tongue of a frog. Purport. Devotional service to the Lord is rendered by all limbs or parts of the body. It is the transcendental dynamic force of the spirit soul. Therefore, a devotee is engaged 100% in the service of the Lord. One can engage in devotional service when the senses of the Lord are purified in relation with the Lord, and one can render service to the Lord with the help of all the senses. As such, the senses and the actions of the senses are to be considered impure or materialistic as long as they are employed only in sense gratification. The purified senses are engaged not in sense gratification but in the service of the Lord in toto. The Lord is the supreme with all senses, and the servant who is part and parcel of the Lord also has the same senses. Service to the Lord is the completely purified use of the senses as described in Bhagavad Gita. The Lord imparted instructions with full senses, and Arjuna received them with full senses, and thus there was a perfect exchange of sensible and logical understanding between the master and the disciple. Spiritual understanding is nothing like an electric charge from the master to the disciple, as foolishly claimed by some propaganda mongers. Everything is full of sense and logic, and the exchange of views between the master and worshipable form is never to be considered. So I'll skip the page. Between the master and disciple is possible only when the reception is submissive and real. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that one should receive the teaching of Lord Chaitanya with intellect and full senses, so that one can logically understand the great mission. In the impure state of a living being, the various senses are fully engaged in mundane affairs. If the ear is not engaged in the service of the Lord by hearing about him from Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, certainly the holes of the ear will be filled with some rubbish. Therefore, the messages of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam should be preached all over the world very loudly. That is the duty of a pure devotee who has actually heard about them from the perfect sources. Many want to speak something to others, but because they are not trained to speak on the subject matter of Vedic wisdom, they are all speaking nonsense, and people are receiving them with no sense. It's a bit of a play of words there. They are all speaking nonsense, and people are receiving them with no sense. There are hundreds and thousands of sources for distributing mundane news of the world, and people of the world are also receiving it. Similarly, the people of the world should be taught to hear the transcendental topics of the Lord, and the devotee of the Lord must speak loudly so that they can hear. The Lords loudly croak, with the results that they invite the snakes to eat them. The human tongue is especially given for chanting the Vedic hymns and not for croaking like frogs. The word asati, used in this verse, is also significant. Asati means a woman who has become a prostitute. A prostitute has no reputation for good womanly qualities. Similarly, the tongue which is given to the human being for chanting the Vedic hymns will be considered a prostitute when engaged in chanting some mundane nonsense. Mangalamanda Shagananjana Salakya Chakshantantina Tasmi Shivare Namaha. So these selection or group of verses here is basically explaining to us that the whole body, the limbs of the body, the head of the body, the senses of the body, if they're not used in the worship of Krishna or disseminating Krishna's message, then they're basically useless as far as the spiritual life is concerned. Yesterday we heard the verses about persons like animalistic persons who praise those who never listen to the transcendental pastimes of Krishna. And today's verse, that if we're not hearing about or chanting the glories of Krishna, we have got ear holes like snakes and the tongue like the frog. Because like the snake, the ears, they don't actually hear. They just feel the vibration on the ground. And that way they're understanding what's going on around them. They don't actually hear in the way that we do. And of course the tongue of the frog is just simply croaking, and the snake picks up on that croaking and very happily eats the frog. So the next verse tomorrow is similar, that if you're not bowing your head, the upper portion of the body, to bowing down to the Supreme Personality, is simply like being decorated, a decorated dead body. So different verses like that is giving example that this human form of life is meant for service to Krishna. Is considered, human form of life is actually considered the ideal vehicle for engaging in devotional service and going back home to our original home, back to Godhead. Basically because in this human form of life, from a universal point of view, we're situated in a system where we've sort of got equal happiness and suffering. The happiness isn't so great that we feel that we're thinking it's a nice place. I think I'd like to stay here forever. But at the same time, the suffering isn't so great that all we're thinking about is how much we're suffering. So it's sort of equal. So there's a touch of happiness there, but it's enough suffering to give us an impetus that we should try to escape this situation. So therefore, this human form of life, along with the free will and the intelligence and the ability to understand who we are, who Krishna is, what our relationship with him is, it gives us the ideal facility to develop our original loving relationship with Krishna. Thanks for stopping a little bit. So in this purport, we hear about one who has not listened to the messages about the prowess and marvellous acts of the Supreme Personality Godhead. So Srimad Bhagavatam is basically full of hearing about the prowess and the marvellous acts of the Personality of Godhead. Actually looked up in the meaning of prowess, just on the dictionary there. So two meanings are given: that the skill or expertise in a particular activity or field is one meaning. The other one is bravery in battle. So both are going to apply to Krishna. His skill and expertise in everything that he does, he's expert. And not just expert in one thing, he's expert and able to achieve so many things at the same time. And also we have bravery in battle. So Krishna, he enjoys this martial sort of activities. You know, like a young boys together, they like to wrestle and roll around and fight each other. And we see in Vrindavan the Krishna with the cowherd boys, they were doing that constantly. So, and also with the prowess in battle, you know, so many stories we're hearing how Krishna was taking on extremely large armies, single-handedly defeating them. So the prowess in battle is very fitting. So we need to develop a taste for hearing the activities of Krishna. That Krishna, he comes to the world to perform these activities to attract the conditioned souls. As we hear in Bhagavad Gita, that he comes to deliver the pious and annihilate the miscreants. So he did that both when he appeared 5,000 years ago on this planet, that to perform these wonderful activities to attract the conditioned souls to Krishna through you know, hearing about and repeating these wonderful activities, and also to annihilate the miscreants, so many demoniac personalities. And that was indeed the prayers of the demigods, that the earth was overburdened with so many armies, unnecessary sort of military forces. So Krishna responded to that prayer, that he come. Of course, it's not that he had to come himself to annihilate the miscreants, but the primary reason was to give pleasure to his devotees, but simultaneously he achieved both at once. So, so many stories we hear in Bhagavatam, Mahabharata, Ramayana, etc., of personality performing all these activities. So, reading this verse, these stories come to mind, that we can have full faith that Krishna is going to give us full protection. I mean, he has so much prowess, marvelous acts. So one of them is giving protection to his devotees. So we may be familiar with the story of Arjuna and Jayadratha. So on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, a lot of the, on both sides, the Kaurava army and the Pandava army, they had amassed the armies together, and the system was that they would get the armies into different formations known as vyuhas. So the most deadly and the most formidable vyuha was a chakra vyuha. So that involved many concentric circles of soldiers, cavalry, chariot, elephants, rotating in circles, like within each other, concentric circles. So they would move through the battlefield, and any soldiers who got caught up in that would be immediately slaughtered. So it so happened that Arjuna, being an expert warrior, he had the training and the skill to be able to enter into that Chakravyuha and create havoc, and he was also able to get out, which is a very rare sort of skill. His son Abhimanyu was only 16 years old. He had the training to get in, but he didn't at that point know actually how to get out. But in the impetuous of youth, he just sort of charged through that because he saw his army was being slaughtered by this Chakravyuha formation. So he just charged in and started slaughtering himself within that. But and the plan was that the other Pandava brothers and the army was to following in, but Jayadratha, one of the opposing soldiers, he had been given a boon by Lord Shiva that he would once be able to check the Pandava soldiers on battle, because he performed great austerities to please Shiva, and Shiva said, "What do you want?" And he said, "I want to be able to kill the Pandavas." And Shiva said, "Not possible. They're under the direct protection of Krishna. So all I can do is I'll give you the benediction. You can check them once on the battlefield." So when the other Pandava brothers coming to help Abhimanyu, Jayadratha was able to check them, and in that way all the great warriors on the Kaurava army, the opposing army, just ganged up on Abhimanyu and killed him. So this was a great loss, a tragedy and particularly for Arjuna. He was his son. So Arjuna was on another area in the battlefield, and he didn't realise what was going on. So when he found out, he was so angry. He was so angry his eyes were the colour of molten copper, and he uttered the vow. So when a Kshatriya utters a vow, there's no question of not fulfilling it. He said, "Tomorrow, if I do not kill that Jayadratha, I'll enter into fire and kill myself." So the Pandavas and even Krishna himself got a little bit worried. I thought, that's a bit of a rash vow, Arjuna, you're the person we're depending on. Without you, we're not going to be able to be victorious. Of course, on the other side, they were very happy. They thought all we have to do is keep Jayadratha alive, and then at the end of the day, Arjuna is going to suicide. So anyway, that was the vow that he made. So the next day, under Drona's guidance, he was like the main general at that time, and Duryodhana's encouragement, they arranged 3 different formations to protect Jayadratha. So there was a formation of a cart formation, and a needle formation, and a wheel formation. So they considered, so basically the Mahabharata describes that it was a group of soldiers foot soldiers, cavalry, chariot and elephants, and it took up the space. It was 20 kilometres wide and 50 kilometres long of soldiers. So you could imagine from here to the coast maybe, Cabarita, and all the way down to Byron Bay. Chock-a-block full of it. So Arjuna had to fight through all that, and Jayadratha was right at the back. So that tells us two things, or a couple of things about Jayadratha. One, he was a coward. Because if he had a vow like that, a true Kshatriya would accept that challenge and he would meet Arjuna on the battlefield and fight one-on-one. But of course Duryodhana, he said, no, don't do that. You will protect you, and in this way Arjuna's going to be, will have to kill himself. So, of course, Krishna, he was a little bit worried, thinking, at least externally, a little bit worried, thinking that, you've made a very rash vow. How are you going to do that? 50 kilometres of soldiers you have to get through by the end of the day, because the fighting normally stops at sunset. That was the understanding. Just between sunrise and sunset, the fighting would go on. So anyway, Arjuna made that vow. There's no question of going against it. So in they charge. Krishna driving the chariot, and Arjuna, he was pulling arrows. His arm was moving so fast it was just a blur, and his bow seemed to be constantly bent. Just arrows flying everywhere. So all day he was like that, and getting closer to Jayadratha, and Jayadratha was thinking, I've got so many soldiers in front of me, but after some time he's thinking, oh my God, he's getting closer and closer. And but he was still some distance to go by the end of the day, and the sun was almost set. But Krishna, being the ever well-wisher of his devotee, using his mystic power, he was just before the sun set. By his mystic power, he covered over the sun, and it looked like the sun had actually set. Everything got dark, and so all the soldiers thought, well, we've saved Jayadratha, he's still alive. And so everybody put down their weapons, and just right at that time, Krishna uncovered the sun again, and at that time Arjuna shot his arrow and killed Jayadratha, and so basically tricked the core of the soldiers. But another thing Jayadratha had up his sleeve, so to speak, was he had the benediction from his father that anybody who kills you, anybody who kills you, their head would explode in many pieces. That was the benediction his father had given him. And so Krishna reminded Arjuna of that just as he shot the arrow. So with Arjuna's skill as an archer, he kept the head, he took the head come off the body, but he kept the head in flight, and it landed on Jayadratha's father, who was in meditation in a nearby forest, and it landed on his lap. And of course, you can imagine the shock of a head landing on your lap, and immediately he threw it off, and the father head, he immediately died as well. So these are, from a materialistic point of view, it sounds pretty gory and etc., etc. Of course, we have to remember that everybody who died on the battlefield, etc., because Krishna was personally present, they all went home back to Godhead. But it wasn't like, being forced unwillingly, like conscripts, forced unwillingly into battle. These were naturally warrior spirit, and they liked to go, they enjoyed having the opportunity to go into the battlefield to show off their prowess. So we have to understand the proper, it's not all about, death and destruction and this is all horrible. It's, you have to understand the proper mood of how this is going on. So this is just one of the many stories of the prowess of Krishna, that, he was in so many ways. I did read a post somebody put up about Mahabharata, that 25 different incidents Krishna saved or helped Arjuna be victorious on the battlefield of Kuru, etc. So in so many ways Krishna was there to help Arjuna. So by hearing about these, and there's also the childhood pastimes. We get the, as described, that the jiva, the individual living entity, has 50 qualities. Lord Shiva has 55. Lord Vishnu has 60, and Krishna has 64. He has 4 special qualities which aren't apparent in any other of their personalities. So those 4 special qualities of transcendental flute playing, pastimes with the gopis. Sometimes I said pastime with the devotees, but particularly pastimes with the gopis, and unparalleled beauty, and also childhood pastimes. So when Krishna was in Vrindavan, every day he just all these wonderful activities with his friends, with the the cowherd boys and the cowherd girls and his parents, and particularly in the 10th canto of Bhagavatam, we're hearing about all these activities. It's like you see when somebody brings their baby, and everybody is all around cooing, and they get all sort of attracted to the baby. The baby does all these cute sort of things, and everybody gets attracted. So it was exactly like that with Krishna. That Krishna did all these cute sort of amazing activities, and playing with the cows, and broken speech, and crawling around and playing games, and the parents are just in complete bliss, because it's not just that it's their baby, but it's Krishna himself, and everybody was attracted, even more attracted than to their own children. So when we're hearing these and developing a taste for hearing, that we're becoming attracted to Krishna's pastime. So that obviously as he gets older, it's more sort of chivalrous pastimes on the battlefield, etc. So by hearing these activities, as the verse mentioned, that one who has not listened to these wonderful activities and doesn't repeat them, it's like having the ear holes of snakes or the tongue of the frog. If we're not hearing about Krishna, we're going to be hearing about so many other things. Remember back in the 70s, they got the book trust, ISKCON Book Trust, got their first, I think it was a telex machine, so they could contact other temples in this way. It's like precursor of the internet, I guess. But and they showed Prabhupada this, and one devotee said, Prabhupada wasn't particularly impressed, really, and one devotee said, Prabhupada, we should get this telex machine in every temple like that, and we can communicate together like that. And Prabhupada said, what is the use? You'll simply gossip. Said, if you want to read something, read my books. So, and we see, everybody's got their phone, got the internet, and we have to, so much gossiping going on. So, but nevertheless, everything can be used in the service of Krishna. Of course, the internet can be used in the service of Krishna also. So one reporter asked Prabhupada, because Prabhupada was saying about how being detached and renounced from the world, etc. And one reporter said, "You're saying you're so renounced, but you're using the aeroplane, you're using the motor car." And Prabhupada replied, if I didn't use it, it would be completely useless. The only people who should be using it are the pure devotees who are using it in the service of Krishna. So the reporter had nothing to say to that. But so everything can be used. I mean, nothing is good or bad in itself in this world, but it depends on the consciousness of the user. So Prabhupada used the example that a knife in the hand of a skilled surgeon can save a life, but that same knife in the hand of a criminal can take a life. So the knife itself is neither good